This story tells the life of a young man named Uyama-kun. Uyama is an ordinary young man who tries to live a normal school life at school. Of course, he stays away from the seeds of trouble, but one day Uyama gets involved with a girl in the same class as him, Akutsu Riko-san. Akutsu is a delinquent girl in class. One of the situations makes the girl suddenly spend a lot of time at Uyama's house. How will Uyama feel and act when facing the girl he really doesn't want to interfere in his affairs? Will Uyama do something terrible behind his door when Akutsu is in the house? Or will Uyama throw the girl out? Uyama is confused. Akutsu is a delinquent girl, but her appearance is quite seductive, sexy with cute behavior in such a confined space. Uyama is sure to get flustered. Uyama is now confused whether he really wants Akutsu to go home or not. Their story will be full of teasing comedy under a single roof. A young man named Uyama sits next to a girl in his class named Akutsu. Akutsu is known as a student who is not well-behaved and a delinquent. The girl always comes late to school. When in class, she never pays attention to the teacher's explanations, skips class, and even sleeps during class hours. For Uyama himself, Akutsu is a girl who brings a bad influence. Uyama actually doesn't want to be involved with Akutsu at all, whether intentionally or not. Akutsu and her friends often disturb Uyama's peace in class. At least that's what Uyama thinks about Akutsu, but it's the opposite. Somehow, Akutsu ends up making Uyama's room her throne. In Uyama's room, Akutsu behaves like the owner of the room and doesn't hesitate to order Uyama to bring her food or snacks. Uyama looks trembling and unable to argue. The origin of Akutsu's rise to control Uyama's room began when Uyama met her in front of his house. Uyama then offered Akutsu a place to stop by. After that incident, every day after school, Akutsu would come and hang out in Uyama's room. The young man's room became a place for Akutsu to laze around. The girl didn't even hesitate to use the objects there. When she read a magazine or comic but there was no sequel, Akutsu would order Uyama to buy it. Uyama could only criticize in his mind, hoping Akutsu would come to her senses and go home. That day, Akutsu suddenly wanted to practice wrestling. In Uyama's room, she said she wanted to practice her wrestling techniques. Uyama stopped her and advised her to go home because it was already evening. Akutsu laughed, trying to convince Uyama to calm down and admit defeat. If Uyama did, then Akutsu was willing to stop. Uyama felt pain when Akutsu began practicing her wrestling techniques on him. The young man felt how scary Akutsu was, but he couldn't stop her. Akutsu was determined to show her skills. The girl immediately changed positions, sitting on Uyama's neck. Uyama insisted on begging for mercy while Akutsu looked so happy. Uyama was having a hard time. Several times he said that even if he gave up, Akutsu still wouldn't listen to Uyama. Uyama honestly couldn't believe how someone he never spoke to at school could now be comfortable in his room. Uyama felt he wouldn't mind if a normal girl was comfortable playing in his room, but Akutsu was a different case. Akutsu was a naughty girl. Uyama was worried that one day someone would show up and get him in trouble. Uyama imagined what it would be like if Akutsu's lover suddenly appeared and asked Uyama for an explanation. Uyama was worried that he would be stopped at school. Uyama's fantasies and worries that day were brought to his senses by Akutsu's touch. The girl lay facing Uyama. She said she was starting to get sleepy. It was also late at night. Akutsu asked if the girl could stay in Uyama's room that night. Uyama gasped and fell silent. Akutsu's question made his mind buzz with demonic scenarios and things he could do to Akutsu. That day, Akutsu was relaxing in Uyama's room once again. Uyama felt uncomfortable. There was a sense of dread as Akutsu remained silent in Uyama's room. The young man realized that he had to kick Akutsu out of his room as soon as possible that day. But the question was how. Uyama entered the room carrying juice and offered it to Akutsu. Uyama had to keep a close eye on Akutsu because he didn't want her to find out what Uyama was hiding. Unfortunately, his worries were in vain. When Uyama entered his room, Akutsu was cheerfully holding several adult magazines with a big smile, asking Uyama which magazines he liked. Uyama begged Akutsu not to tell anyone at school about his collection of adult magazines. Akutsu smiled mischievously. Looking at the magazine covers, she could deduce Uyama's preferences regarding the type of girl he liked. Uyama grew increasingly worried. If what Akutsu knew about him in his room got back to school, Uyuma's life would be over. The girls would no longer view him as a good boy, even though he had worked so hard to hide his preferences. Akutsu said that she probably wouldn't tell the school anything. Uyuma was relieved for a moment, thinking that Akutsu was probably a good girl. However, Akutsu continued, saying that to keep her quiet, Uyuma would have to do what he always did when watching the adult DVD. If he didn't do it, she would tell the school the next day. Uyuma was speechless. Uyuma begged Akutsu. He also apologized and asked them not to watch the DVD that was in Akutsu's hands. Akutsu climbed onto Uyuma's shoulder and refused what Uyuma asked her to do. Uyuma has to do what Akutsu wants if he doesn't want to be called a pervert at school the next day. Uyuma still rebels because, to be honest, at school he has also been called a pervert. In the end, they continued to stare at the LCD screen that was playing the adult DVD. Both of them were silent for a moment. Akutsu also even froze. She didn't expect Uyuma to watch something really crazy. Uyuma has no hope. His school life will definitely end tomorrow. Uyuma trembled. The young man was upset. He was determined to kick Akutsu out and never let her enter his room again. It would all be over once his secret was revealed. Uyuma was about to talk to Akutsu, but Akutsu had already called the young man. The girl asked Uyuma, whom she thought was a big-breast maniac. Akutsu wanted to know if, for someone like Uyuma, Akutsu was his type. The girl realized that she also had quite large assets. While being shown Akutsu's assets, Uyuma seemed silent, confused about how to respond. The young man felt embarrassed and lucky. In the end, he didn't say anything and would tell Akutsu not to come to his room again tomorrow. Uyuma still hoped that Akutsu wouldn't tell anyone about what had happened. As before, this time Akutsu came to Uyuma's room again. The girl slept on purpose, not caring about the owner of the room. Uyuma had reminded Akutsu that the girl actually had no reason to be in Uyuma's room. Akutsu was advised to go home, but Akutsu refused. The girl argued that she was too tired to move even though the girl's feet kept moving, hitting the mattress. Uyuma felt annoyed. The young man couldn't calm down when Akutsu, who was known to be a naughty girl, was in his room. Uyuma also couldn't do anything since the girl was there. Suddenly, Akutsu said something that sounded quite challenging. Akutsu offered that if Uyuma could push her off the bed roughly, she would immediately go home. It was quite an attractive offer, but Uyuma didn't have time to respond. The young man was still processing what he had just heard. Akutsu refused to give him time to think. The girl had already started counting down. Uyuma only had 2 minutes to get Akutsu off the bed roughly. Uyuma still didn't understand, especially the roughly part. That was certainly impossible for Uyuma to do. Uyuma hadn't been rough with a girl for a day, but in this case he absolutely had to. On the bed, Akutsu continued to tease Uyuma. As the young man continued to walk, with a mischievous laugh, Akutsu said that if Uyuma didn't start touching her, he definitely wouldn't be able to push Akutsu off the bed. Uyuma then realized that Akutsu herself already knew that Uyuma wouldn't have the courage to do that. Uyuma protested. He said that it wasn't fair. Akutsu didn't expect Uyuma's response to be like that. The girl teased again, guessing that Uyuma seemed embarrassed to touch a woman. Akutsu then smiled broadly because such an attitude was exactly what Akutsu expected from someone like Uyuma. But Uyuma still became the subject of Akutsu's laughter. According to the girl, it doesn't matter whether he's a virgin or not. A man or young man must have experience with women. Uyuma grew increasingly annoyed. That day he learned why people hated Akutsu so easily. Akutsu was too stubborn to the point that it made those around her disgusted. Uyuma began to make up his mind. If it had to happen, Uyuma would make sure he really pushed Akutsu and made her learn her lesson. Akutsu, who was then stared at by Uyuma, pretended to be amazed while calling Uyuma's gaze a lecherous stare. Uyuma, already determined, instead of pushing, the young man chose to pull Akutsu by the wrist. Uyuma tried so hard to pull Akutsu off the bed, but the girl didn't move. Instead, Uyuma was the one who trembled. Akutsu laughed in victory. In an instant, the situation was reversed, and now Uyuma was below Akutsu. Uyuma was defeated. Akutsu even called him pathetic for losing to a woman. With this result, Akutsu was sure that Uyama would never win against Akutsu, especially pushing the girl. Uyama remained silent. Akutsu, who was above him, said that Uyama could try his luck again the next day, but that was if Uyama really wanted Akutsu out of his room. Hearing Akutsu's declaration made Uyama's body stiffen instantly. It could be concluded that Uyama would be in the same bed with a woman even tomorrow. Uyama did lose the bet, but the young man began to think again. According to him, losing in that case wasn't so bad. Akutsu returned to Uyama's room. However, this time it was different. The girl seemed to be sleeping like a statue on the bed. Akutsu waking up often made Uyama restless, but Akutsu sleeping in his bed was also not something that should be done. Uyama would not be able to sleep if his bed were used, so Uyama tried to wake Akutsu, who was sleeping. However, before Uyama's hand touched the sleeping Akutsu, the young man suddenly remembered how Akutsu reacted when the teacher woke her up at school when she was caught sleeping in the middle of class. Akutsu's reaction was very scary. The girl screamed, not liking to be touched. Uyama then changed his mind and was now even more confused. What should he do in such a situation? After thinking confusedly, Uyama finally decided to wake Akutsu. He didn't care if the girl would be angry because the room was Uyama's room. Uyama had to tell Akutsu to go home, and this time Uyama was determined not to change his mind. When he turned to wake Akutsu, Uyama saw Akutsu turned around so that Akutsu's facial expression while sleeping could be clearly seen. Very scary. Because of what he saw, Uyama ended up changing his mind. The young man would wake Akutsu slowly and gently. Uyama trembled because the situation seemed bad. Uyama was worried that if he woke Akutsu, there would be a misunderstanding. But his mind was also sure that he was about to do something normal. When Uyama's hand was about to touch Akutsu, the girl grabbed Uyama's hand first. Uyama immediately apologized and tried to explain that Akutsu had just misunderstood. Uyama only intended to wake Akutsu, not to do anything strange. Akutsu called him a bastard. Uyama was naturally shocked, but upon closer inspection, she was actually just dreaming talking. Akutsu, still asleep, unconsciously rubbed her cheek with his hand, which she was holding. Uyama remained silent and trembling. He didn't want to upset her. Uyama ultimately decided it would be best not to wake her up. In the end, Uyama still let Akutsu fall asleep soundly while holding Uyama's hand without letting go at all. It was after school, and as usual, Akutsu was already at Uyama's house. She even went in before the homeowner. Akutsu was seen answering a call from her friend, Misaki. Misaki was heard informing Akutsu that their activities had been discovered. Akutsu was shocked. Her fate at school tomorrow seemed certain. She would be called to the counseling room. Uyama could clearly hear Akutsu's conversation on the phone. The young man felt quite uncomfortable because Akutsu was so noisy, even though she was in someone else's room. Uyama suspected that what was happening was frightening. Suddenly, the topic of the call changed. Akutsu sounded cheerful, repeating that her friend was coming to where she was. Uyama was the one who was tense. The young man looked uncomfortable. What he had just heard was something he had been dreading. Uyama had a vision in his mind. He was certain that Akutsu's friends were also naughty people. If Akutsu called her friends over, Uyama's proposal would truly turn into a hangout for delinquents. Uyama imagined Akutsu and her friends would cause him trouble and mistreat him and his room. Misaki on the phone asked where Akutsu was. Akutsu almost answered, and Uyama was nervous. Uyama was worried that Akutsu would really call her friends to come. Uyama had to immediately stop Akutsu from opening her mouth. Akutsu said on the phone that there was also a man at her place. When Uyama tried to grab Akutsu's cell phone, Akutsu was able to stop him. The call was interrupted. Akutsu apologized to the other end of the phone, saying that the man at her place really wanted to touch her and was very persistent. Akutsu did not forget to say that Uyama was just her classmate. On the other hand, Uyama felt a strange sensation from the soles of his feet, but Uyama had also managed to hang up the phone. Uyama spoke, asking Akutsu to reconsider. Uyama really didn't want anyone else to come to his room or anyone else to know that Akutsu was often in Uyama's room. Akutsu was fed up with Uyama's whining. The girl told Uyama that she didn't tell anyone about Uyama's room. The girl just laughed while teasing Uyama. She concluded that Uyama really wanted to be alone with Akutsu. In his mind, Uyama had a thought that it would be better if he were alone with Akutsu, but he immediately dismissed the thought. Akutsu approached to explain that she was just joking, so Uyama didn't need to be angry. Uyama was starting to get really tired of his own thoughts. If it continued like this, Uyama thought that it seemed like the worst thing would happen soon. Uyama didn't realize that Akutsu looked at him for a moment. Akutsu said seriously that she would never tell Uyama's room to her friends. Uyama's room was Akutsu's private hangout, so Uyama's room would only belong to Akutsu herself. Akutsu told Uyama not to invite anyone else to the place except her. After giving her a warning, Akutsu lay down as usual and fell asleep. For the time being, that was a good thing, Uyama thought. This time it started at school. Akutsu was hanging out with her friends in class as usual. One of her friends told her that her skirt was up, revealing her underwear. Akutsu didn't feel embarrassed or see it as a problem. Instead, she said it was a way to earn money. Uyama was in class, silent and embarrassed. The young man felt that Akutsu and her friends were indeed noisy and dangerous in all their ways. School was over, and that day, as usual, Akutsu stopped by Uyama's room again. However, something was different. The girl was sitting carelessly without paying attention to her skirt. Uyama wondered if Akutsu was trying to get money from him by showing the contents of her skirt. Akutsu herself was focused on playing a game that she was having difficulty completing the quest for. Uyama sat and faced the door so that his back was to Akutsu. The man tried to calm down because Akutsu didn't seem to notice that her underwear was clearly visible. However, Uyama couldn't take it anymore. His feelings made Uyama have to swallow hard. He couldn't understand what was really going on in her mind. Uyama was wary because he felt that if Akutsu found out that he had accidentally seen the contents of the girl's skirt, Uyama's fate would be in jeopardy. No one could guarantee the young man's safety. Akutsu rose from her seat and was now in a squatting position. Akutsu was puzzled by Uyama's odd behavior. The girl naturally asked for clarification. Uyama turned away as if in denial. His mind was in turmoil because Akutsu had unknowingly opened her crotch, revealing her underwear. Akutsu was still trying to figure out what exactly had made Uyama act like that. The girl was sure there must be something up, even though Uyama denied it as best he could. It wasn't long before Akutsu realized something. Uyama, realizing his mistake, bowed his head and apologized to Akutsu, handing over his wallet. The young man said he didn't have much money, but he was willing to do whatever she asked him to do. Uyama begged her not to tell anyone. Akutsu herself was surprised that Uyama seemed so worried and didn't even listen to her. Akutsu felt that Uyama accidentally seeing her underwear was no big deal. The girl wanted Uyama to lend her the games and manga he owned. Akutsu even said that she was willing to provide special services and allow Uyama to see Akutsu's underwear for free. Akutsu told Uyama not to tell anyone about it either. Akutsu also asked Uyama to teach her how to pass the game level that had been giving Akutsu difficulty. Uyama could only bow his head obediently to the girl's request. The reward was truly very special, appropriate, and extraordinary. Uyama just realized that the incident was purely an accident of Akutsu showing her underwear. The unexpected day finally arrived. That day, Akutsu returned to Uyama's room, but to his surprise, Akutsu didn't stay long and decided to go home. However, the situation was scarier than usual, according to Uyama. Akutsu arrived looking injured, as if she had just been in a fight. Uyama was reluctant to think further. When he looked at his bed, Uyama saw that Akutsu had left her phone behind. The young man was sure that if he went after Akutsu, she would still be able to return it. The young man stared silently at the phone on his bed. However, Uyama was curious. Akutsu always teased Uyama with her intimidating facial expression. Uyama wondered if she could see Akutsu's weak side. That day, Akutsu looked like she'd lost a fight or something. Uyama soon realized that what he was thinking was someone else's business. He didn't need to be like that, and he didn't need to interfere. Uyama grabbed Akutsu's phone and accidentally lit up the screen, showing a cat video. Curious, Uyama played it and watched it. In the video, Akutsu was seen trying to play and get close to a cat on the street. Akutsu seemed to be trying to make a video with the cat, But it was very cute if the cat was also afraid of Akutsu and was reluctant to approach. The cat ended up running away, and before it completely left, it managed to scratch Akutsu. Akutsu still tried to reach the cat, but the cat was reluctant to even be touched by Akutsu. Uyama watched the recording until the end. He then realized that Akutsu's bad mood that day was probably because she couldn't touch the adorable cat. Uyama had just discovered that Akutsu could also be cute, like any other girl. Suddenly, Akutsu appeared from behind, her face bright red with embarrassment. The girl wanted Uyama to stop playing the video. The girl realized she had left her phone behind, so she went back to get it. Uyama was very surprised by Akutsu, who suddenly appeared behind him. Akutsu wanted Uyama to forget about it, even determined to make Uyama forget about it. Uyama apologized for being so rude. That day, Akutsu ended up not going home, but something pleasant about her became clear. This time Akutsu was very upset. Uyama noticed something on the girl's hand. He then asked what was wrong with Akutsu's hand. Akutsu only replied that she had acted carelessly that day. Akutsu had apparently tried to hide it, but Uyama knew exactly why Akutsu's hand was injured. Uyama asked if Akutsu didn't want to go to the hospital to treat her hand, but Akutsu immediately refused. For her, the injury was not a big deal, contrary to what Uyama thought. From what Uyama saw, Akutsu looked very hurt. Besides pity, if Akutsu had gone to the hospital, then Uyama's plan to get Akutsu out that day would have succeeded. Akutsu clicked her tongue in annoyance. She said that she would not want to do what Uyama said. Uyama was said to have caused a big problem for Akutsu. Akutsu grabbed the young man's collar but was trembling and enduring extreme pain. Uyama looked uncomfortable. He knew that the girl in front of him really had to go to the hospital. Akutsu finally complained about how painful her injury was. Uyama was relieved that the girl could finally admit her pain. The young man had asked him to go to the hospital, but Akutsu was furious, leaving Uyama at a loss for what to do. Uyama had to do something before Akutsu became seriously ill from her injuries. Uyama suddenly came up with the idea of giving Akutsu something sweet. The young man then offered Akutsu ice cream. Akutsu really liked ice cream, but the girl looked even angrier and even called Uyama a bastard. Why was that? Because Uyama gave Akutsu ice cream that was still very frozen. With her injured hand, Akutsu had difficulty scooping it up for herself to eat. Akutsu, who couldn't do anything, became even angrier and intended to remember the incident when her hand healed. Uyama was confused. Akutsu was really annoyed because of that. In the end, Akutsu suddenly opened her mouth in front of Uyama. Uyama was certainly even more confused and didn't know the meaning of Akutsu's actions. The young man didn't understand what Akutsu wanted from him. Akutsu then said that Uyama should feed her. Uyama was very surprised but also felt quite lucky. The young man even spontaneously hoped in his mind that tomorrow Akutsu's hand would still hurt like that day. Akutsu had arrived again and was playing in Uyama's room. The girl felt pain in her leg. Uyama asked Akutsu if she had been practicing that day and if her leg hurt, but she answered no. The reason why Akutsu's leg hurt was because she ran away from the guidance counselor on her way home from school. Akutsu was very grateful that Uyama's place was not far from school. Uyama couldn't believe it. In his mind, he said that Akutsu shouldn't have used her room as a place to escape. Akutsu lay face down on Uyama's bed. The girl then suddenly asked Uyama to massage her. Uyama again couldn't understand why he had to give a massage to a naughty student who had run away from her school. Furthermore, with Akutsu's position at that time, Uyama could once again clearly see the contents of Akutsu's skirt. Uyama was very reluctant to do Akutsu's request, but if he didn't, Akutsu would become scary to Uyama and even refuse to go home. Uyama felt hesitant to touch the girl's body. Akutsu asked Uyama to hurry up. Uyama tried so hard not to think about anything and borrowed Akutsu properly and finished without realizing it. Uyama was very surprised when he touched Akutsu, and Akutsu suddenly made a sound that could be misunderstood. The girl blushed and smiled mischievously. She said that if Uyama touched Akutsu like that, Akutsu would definitely feel strange. Uyama begged Akutsu to keep her voice down because the neighbors might hear them. Akutsu was just joking. The girl wanted Uyama to continue the massage. Uyama was really fed up with how long Akutsu would be satisfied teasing him. Annoyed, Uyama then decided to give Akutsu a special massage as revenge. The young man was determined to continue. Akutsu was very surprised, and this time she was really surprised. Because of Uyama's massage like that, Akutsu still made the same sounds as before. Because of that, Uyama became more and more intense. The young man did not hear Akutsu, who warned Uyama not to touch certain points on Akutsu's body. Uyama then intended to change his method. The young man just realized that Akutsu was actually shaking. Uyama just noticed how Akutsu's expression was after his massage earlier. Uyama even received a warning from Akutsu. Akutsu asked Uyama to stop massaging her because she said she was feeling better. That's when Uyama realized that the sound Akutsu just made was not intentional. Instantly, Uyama couldn't remember where his hand had touched Akutsu's body. After that, Akutsu became silent. Uyama also remained silent. The atmosphere between them was awkward and strange. This time Uyama was already lying on his bed when Akutsu just arrived at Uyama's room. Akutsu tried to wake Uyama so that the young man would leave the bed so that Akutsu could occupy it. Akutsu had considered Uyama's bed to be his. Uyama was forced to get up and move, but the young man didn't move as if he were really asleep. Uyama tried to look as natural as possible to appear really asleep. He didn't want to get up and move from his own bed. That day Akutsu also came to his room, so Uyama's idea to make Akutsu go home was to pretend to be asleep. Akutsu mumbled that she wanted to play games. Uyama already knew that. Uyama knew very well that Akutsu had been really wanting to play games since yesterday. So, Uyama then decided to pretend to be asleep on the bed so that Akutsu would give up and finally choose to go home. But honestly, Uyama didn't know what would happen if he closed his eyes. What he was doing made him feel scared too. Akutsu could kick Uyama and do anything, but Uyama definitely wouldn't be able to retaliate. Suddenly, Uyama heard the sound of a camera. Akutsu took a selfie with Uyama sleeping against the wall in the background. Akutsu said that one day she would use the photo to threaten Uyama. Uyama, hearing this, was even more afraid because of Akutsu's actions. Akutsu laughed happily and saved the photo. The girl felt victorious because she could use the digital footprint later. Uyama wondered what Akutsu meant by using and threatening. Akutsu climbed onto the bed, saying she was going to do something even more extreme. Uyama, sensing Akutsu getting onto the bed, began to panic. Akutsu slightly exposed her assets and planned to take a photo with her breasts. Uyama was very surprised and curious about what kind of photo Akutsu was planning to take. Akutsu looked at Uyama and said that the young man's facial expression, which appeared to be sleeping, seemed to understand and know what was really happening. Uyama flinched but remained silent while Akutsu took a photo of his face. Uyama was quite confused. If Akutsu took a photo of his face, Uyama would have no excuse. Uyama began to consider whether or not to get up. But if Akutsu found out he was pretending to be asleep, Uyama was sure she would play a trick on him. Akutsu realized something. The girl knew very well that Uyama had never looked at her eyes and that he always had a wary expression on his face. Uyama hoped she would stop looking at him. Akutsu's hand suddenly touched his face. After touching Uyama's cheek, who still refused to wake up, Akutsu finally decided to just read manga. Uyama was still in shock but continued to pretend to be asleep. In the end, Akutsu still didn't go home and remained in Uyama's room. As usual, Akutsu came to Uyama's room again. This time, the girl was enjoying her time reading manga on Uyama's bed. Akutsu was so engrossed in reading the manga that she unconsciously lifted her skirt again. Uyama was having a hard time understanding how Akutsu could be so careless in a young man's room. Uyama really wanted Akutsu to leave his room as soon as possible. He was so annoyed that Uyama accidentally glared at Akutsu. Akutsu then noticed the sharp gaze. Akutsu got up to confirm what she felt. Akutsu immediately exuded an intimidating aura. Noticing Uyama's intense gaze, Akutsu appeared challenged, daring him to attack her. Uyama was at a loss to explain that he hadn't intended to do so. When asked why Uyama was staring at her, he was at a loss for an explanation. Of course, Uyama won't say the real reason. The young man was sure that he would not be allowed to live if it was discovered that Akutsu had been staring at the girl's assets, which, whether intentionally or not, had been revealed and shown by the owner himself. There is no need to reveal her mistake. Being forgiven has made Akutsu angry with Uyama. The girl then locked the young man with martial arts movements. Akutsu said that she was angry. The girl was reluctant to let Uyama go until the young man wanted to talk about the reasons. Uyama was pressed. Now he has no distance from Akutsu. The situation is not good, but on the other hand, it is also good. Uyama begged Akutsu for forgiveness. Akutsu herself was reluctant to forgive Uyama if he remained silent. The girl knew that Uyama had something to explain to Akutsu. Uyama couldn't say it. If he said that he wanted Akutsu to go home and leave his room, of course Akutsu would be even angrier. Uyama was increasingly pressured. The situation was getting worse, and the young man was also increasingly at his limit. Without distance from Akutsu, the young man could smell Akutsu's body fragrance and even the softness of Akutsu's skin so clearly. Akutsu still thought Uyama wanted to fight her. Uyama didn't stay silent and tried to free himself from the girl. Uyama then tried to turn himself around, and now the young man was facing Akutsu. Akutsu could see something belonging to Uyama had risen. The girl made a mocking smile, again demanding an explanation about what was happening down there. Uyama turned away in embarrassment. He refused to explain. Akutsu was just as stubborn. The girl was reluctant to let Uyama go if the young man didn't talk. Uyama blushed. His cheeks were red from embarrassment. He only begged and apologized to Akutsu, although he still didn't let go. After that happened, Akutsu's judo lock loosened a little. Akutsu came to Uyama's place again. This time, Akutsu asked Uyama to buy her a sweet dessert. The girl demanded understanding from Uyama. Uyama himself, although reluctant, he could not refuse. All the young man did was continue to comply with Akutsu's requests. Uyama was well aware that the action he should take was to kick Akutsu out, because if the girl did not come to his place, Uyama felt he could rest easy. When he had just arrived in front of his room door, Uyama suddenly heard Akutsu's voice screaming, calling his name. Uyama rushed in and checked. It turned out, Akutsu was screaming because a cockroach had appeared on Uyama's bed. Akutsu still looked scared and wouldn't stop screaming. Uyama was still very surprised by Akutsu's screams, but the young man didn't immediately enter the room. He saw from behind the door how Akutsu looked very shocked. The girl didn't even realize that Uyama had returned. Seeing how Akutsu was so scared because of the cockroach made Uyama. Seeing Akutsu like a girl in general. His view of Akutsu as a scary girl faded since. Uyama was reluctant to go in and get rid of the cockroach that appeared. He wanted to let the situation last longer so that Akutsu would finally think about going home. Uyama assumed that Akutsu would be reluctant to come back to Uyama's place if she knew there was a cockroach that could suddenly appear at any time in the young man's room. Uyama tried to let Akutsu go for a moment. Minutes passed, and the girl was still shaking and didn't move an inch from her place. Akutsu was really afraid of a cockroach. What Uyama saw was completely new. The young man had never seen Akutsu act so cowardly before. Uyama felt victorious. Seeing Akutsu, he concluded that she had finally experienced the same terrifying experience as Uyama. However, Uyama also couldn't let this situation continue forever, and he also didn't want a cockroach running around his room. Uyama thought about helping Akutsu. As he was about to enter the room, he stopped when he heard Akutsu use his name so softly. At first, Uyama was shocked and thought Akutsu was now angry. The young man concluded that Akutsu was gathering the anger and fear she felt because of the cockroach's appearance, and then wanted to take it out on Uyama later. But Uyama was shocked again when it turned out that Akutsu was actually hoping that Uyama would come back soon and help her. The look of fear and almost crying on Uyama's face was truly a rare sight for Uyama. Uyama turned away and went back. His face was bright red with embarrassment at hearing his name called like a hero whose arrival he had been waiting for. Uyama decided to let Akutsu be like this for a little longer. He reasoned that it would be bad if Uyama showed up and acted normal, even after witnessing everything. At least that's what Uyama thought and did. But the young man, who had briefly left Akutsu alone, was soon caught by Akutsu. Akutsu didn't immediately shut up and forgive him. Uyama was hit by the girl in anger. The next day, Akutsu spoke up and wanted Uyama to do something for her. Uyama spontaneously said that he would not do what Akutsu asked. Akutsu was immediately shocked that she could be rejected before even saying what she wanted to ask Uyama. Uyama was also not to blame. He was the one who spontaneously refused. It was because Uyama felt that he had a bad feeling about what Akutsu would ask. Akutsu then tried to seduce Uyama. The girl acted as if embarrassed while saying that she only wanted to do that with Uyama. Of course, a big question mark arose in the young man's mind. Akutsu then took out her book. She showed one of the pages while explaining that she had received some detention assignments for being late several times, skipping class, and even breaking several school rules. If Akutsu didn't get those assignments in by tomorrow, she would be considered for expulsion from the school. Akutsu invited Uyama to do the assignment together. Just like before, Uyama refused to interfere. Akutsu didn't give up. Uyama and Akutsu seemed positive about that. How Uyama didn't seem willing if Uyama had misunderstood. The young man thought that Akutsu was asking him to do something like an adult scene together. That's why Uyama looked embarrassed, and even his cheeks were flushed red. Akutsu seduced Uyama again. The girl promised the young man that if Uyama was willing to help her, Akutsu would let him fondle her assets. Uyama was silent. Hiju almost wavered again. Still, Uyama refused. Even though his heart was beating fast, Uyama still said that Akutsu had to do her own job. Akutsu looked annoyed that Uyama refused when the young man looked like he had never fondled girls' assets before in his life. How could a virgin refuse the opportunity that Akutsu gave him so easily? Honestly, Uyama knew that Akutsu's offer was just a trap. The girl would definitely make Uyama do all the work. Akutsu began to whine. She said her family would definitely kick her out if she were expelled from school. Uyama couldn't believe Akutsu would give up rather than try. He thought her parents sounded pretty strict. Akutsu was furious. She didn't care about detention. Uyama couldn't fathom how the girl really thought. He couldn't do anything. After all, what happened to Akutsu was what she got for doing bad things. Uyama was still reluctant to help Akutsu. Akutsu no longer cared if her parents kicked her out of the house. Akutsu said that she could stay in Uyama's room forever if that happened. Akutsu was silent, and Uyama was also silent after hearing what Akutsu had just said. Weighing the pros and cons, Uyama finally gave in. The young man invited himself to help Akutsu. Akutsu then smiled brightly, saying that she knew that Uyama really wanted to fondle her assets. Uyama was busy working on detention while having so many things on his mind. A lot of things popped into his head, but he wouldn't be alive if he did any of them. In the end, when the task was finished, Akutsu never let Uyama fondle them. Today Uyama came home late. The teacher asked Uyama to do something before going home. Uyama couldn't refuse his teacher's request. After all, Uyama didn't participate in any extracurricular activities, so he had enough free time. However, his teacher's request for Uyama would help him in the end. Uyama thought that if Akutsu realized that Uyama wasn't home, Akutsu would definitely give up and choose to go home herself. Uyama now returned home in a happy mood. The young man planned to read all the manga he had been wanting to read. Upon arriving near his house, Uyama encountered an unexpected sight. Akutsu was pounding on his door, screaming for Uyama to open it, as if she were certain he was inside. Her behavior was more like a loan shark than a visiting classmate. Uyama then spoke up, asking Akutsu to stop because her behavior was disturbing the neighbors. Akutsu was then surprised to find Uyama emerging from outside the house instead of inside. Akutsu looked annoyed and asked where Uyama had been. Uyama then replied that he had something to do, and instead he now asked why Akutsu looked so angry. Akutsu fell silent. The atmosphere was silent for a moment before finally Akutsu answered softly that she thought Uyama was ignoring her. Of course, Uyama really wanted to do the same, but unfortunately he couldn't. Uyama laughed a little and saw that Akutsu could also act childish. Akutsu then looked at Uyama with a sharp gaze while asking what the young man was laughing at about her. Uyama was shocked to silence, not meaning to intentionally laugh at Akutsu. Akutsu then said that she would make sure that incident would not happen again. Uyama began to worry about what Akutsu would do to him after saying those words that resembled a threat just now. The young man was afraid that Akutsu would pull out a weapon and cut Uyama. Uyama wanted to stop the girl, but what Akutsu took out was her cell phone. The girl forced Uyama to exchange contact numbers with her. If a similar incident happened again in the future, Uyama was required to call and inform Akutsu first. Uyama was stunned, his face flushed with embarrassment. He could only obey when Akutsu told him to use the messaging app. His fear-driven nervousness quickly turned to the excitement of adding a girl's phone number for the first time on his phone. At school, Uyama, who was alone at the time, was suddenly approached by a male classmate. His friend wanted to confirm that Uyama lived alone. When Uyama confirmed it, the student then curiously asked if he could come over to Uyama's house to play. Uyama seemed hesitant to answer, but when he saw Akutsu, who seemed to be in a bad mood, Uyama told his friend that he couldn't that day. His friend then became curious as to why his request was rejected. Could it be that Uyama already had plans? His friend suspected that Uyama had plans to spend time with his girlfriend. Uyama flinched and was silent for a moment. After that, he then confirmed it and used the excuse of planning to spend time with his girlfriend as an alibi to refuse his friend's invitation. Unbeknownst to Uyama, Akutsu overheard him. Uyama was being such a show-off. Akutsu held back her laughter while he turned his head away. Unable to hold it in any longer, Uyama spoke to Akutsu, telling her that her smile was frightening to him. Akutsu burst out laughing. Akutsu then teased the young man, playing the role of Uyama's girlfriend. Uyama was asked to call Akutsu by her first name. She even taught Uyama to call her Riko. Uyama realized that his actions at school had made him a tease for Akutsu forever. Akutsu laughed and asked, was she surprised? Since when did she become Uyama's girlfriend? Akutsu was very sure that at school Uyama talked about Akutsu as an excuse to reject his friend's plan. Uyama didn't deny it. The young man apologized to Akutsu for his actions at school earlier. Akutsu brought up all the chats Uyama had said to his friends at school earlier. Akutsu said that a lame guy like Uyama doesn't have a girlfriend. Will be out in no time. Uyama in his mind also agreed. Akutsu didn't mind what Uyama said to his friend at school. After all, Akutsu was also the one who told Uyama not to let anyone come to that place. Akutsu doesn't mind helping Uyama put up a front just that once. While hugging Uyama from behind, Akutsu said that what Uyama said might turn out to be true. Uyama was silent because he felt horrified. Akutsu couldn't stop laughing at how Uyama's reaction never failed to make him laugh. Uyama now realized that he was wrong. Uyama remembered his wish for Akutsu to leave his house. A special day for Uyama. The young man looked very happy, especially when he looked out the window. Bad weather had struck. The city was being hit by a very heavy downpour. The reason why Uyama was so happy with the weather was because he thought the bad weather would stop Akutsu from coming to his house. Unfortunately, Uyama's guess was completely wrong. Akutsu appeared at Uyama's doorstep drenched, complaining about the sudden downpour. Uyama was at a loss for words. If she had known it would rain so heavily, Akutsu shouldn't have come to Uyama's place. Akutsu was very upset because she was soaked. Uyama told Akutsu to dry herself first before going inside. Akutsu didn't care and instead showed him her underwear, which was clearly visible because her shirt was see-through from the rain. Uyama reacted, shouting that Akutsu didn't need to show him that. Uyama went to get a towel. In his mind, of course, the young man admitted how hot Akutsu looked with that drenched appearance. Akutsu didn't need a towel. The girl took off her shirt in front of Uyama and wanted him to let her take a shower at his house. Screaming inside was certainly Uyama's spontaneous reaction. Uyama questioned what Akutsu was actually doing. How could a girl just take off her clothes in front of a young man? Akutsu didn't feel like she was doing anything wrong. She's all sticky and gross. Uyama was allowed to see Akutsu's underwear. It didn't make any difference to Akutsu either. Unlike Uyama, who was fully aware of how different what Akutsu had just said was. Uyama returned and gave Akutsu a towel. The girl was still teasing Uyama, asking why the young man was looking away from her. Didn't Uyama have the urge to look at Akutsu's assets at that time? Uyama was fully aware that Akutsu was teasing him. If Uyama was caught staring at Akutsu, he would definitely fall into her trap. Akutsu questioned what Uyama had given her. Uyama immediately replied, saying that Akutsu didn't need to worry because the towel he had given her at that time was a new towel that had not been used. Akutsu didn't run out of ideas to tease Uyama. The girl said that maybe Uyama would use the towel that Akutsu had used to dry his wet body. Uyama was called a perverted young man. Of course, Uyama denied it nervously. Akutsu was very entertained by Uyama's response. Uyama didn't accept it, asking how Akutsu couldn't be embarrassed to say that when she was only wearing underwear in front of a young man. For Akutsu, what she did was just a normal thing. Suddenly, Akutsu sneezed in front of Uyama. Uyama reminded Akutsu to immediately dry her body so she wouldn't catch a cold. When he saw Akutsu sneeze, Uyama realized something. The girl was apparently embarrassed by her sneeze. Uyama excused it because with Akutsu's attitude like that, her sneeze, which was quite girly for him, was really unexpected. Uyama accidentally showed an amused expression, which irritated Akutsu, who felt like she was being laughed at. Despite her anger, Akutsu continued to sneeze. Uyama witnessed this, amused by how cute Akutsu looked. However, he got a scolding for staring at her for too long. Akutsu came over drenched from a downpour that day. Because Akutsu's clothes were wet, the girl ended up wearing her gym uniform. Uyama had never seen Akutsu in a gym uniform before. The young man didn't expect that the first time he would see Akutsu wearing a gym uniform would be in his room. Suddenly, Uyama, who was pensive, was surprised by Akutsu complaining. The girl complained about the unpleasant smell of her gym uniform. She even asked Uyama to smell it. Uyama, surprised. He wanted to do that too, but of course my sane mind refused to act impolitely. Uyama then remembered something. He asked Akutsu if their class had gym class that day. Uyama was quite surprised when Akutsu brought her gym uniform that day. Akutsu looked disgusted. His heart didn't have gym class, but Akutsu always carried her gym uniform in her bag all the time. It was revealed why Akutsu's gym uniform could smell so bad. Uyama asked when the girl last washed her gym uniform. Akutsu refused to answer. What was certain was that her gym uniform was still fine because she was sure she had washed it not long ago. Akutsu forced Uyama to lend her clothes because the girl herself felt too disgusting to wear her gym uniform. Uyama was very surprised when Akutsu wanted to borrow his clothes. Akutsu even threatened to sleep on Uyama's bed wearing the smelly gym uniform if Uyama didn't lend her clean clothes. Uyama himself actually didn't really think that if Akutsu carried out her threat, it would be a bad thing for Uyama. Akutsu ended up borrowing clean clothes from Uyama. The girl now felt comfortable. Uyama was still silent. His mind was busy thinking about if at that time Akutsu was wearing his clothes. That day Uyama felt that his day was truly extraordinary. Uyama even had wild thoughts. Only his common sense was able to realize it immediately. Suddenly Akutsu asked if the clothes she was wearing and borrowed from Uyama were the clothes Uyama often wore in his daily life. Uyama was silent. Akutsu continued to tease him. Akutsu wanted to get back at Uyama, who had criticized the girl because her clothes had not been washed. Akutsu then tried to smell Uyama's clothes that the girl was wearing to check the smell. Uyama was calm. After all, the clothes Akutsu was wearing were clothes that had just been washed. Uyama reminded Akutsu not to sniff his clothes too hard. Uyama blushed again. Not only Uyama, but Akutsu's face also appeared flushed. The girl realized that the clothes she was wearing didn't smell, but she still asked for a moment to smell them longer. Uyama certainly couldn't fathom what Akutsu was doing. In the end, Akutsu didn't leave Uyama's room even though the rain had stopped. At school, Uyama was about to go buy snacks for his lunch. Some female students in his class stopped Uyama and asked him to buy them snacks for him too. Uyama was surprised. He thought it seemed like the students were Akutsu's friends. Uyama then felt so inferior because even at school he also had to be an errand boy. Uyama intended to refuse to help the girls because he felt he would continue to be taken advantage of if the request was not rejected from the start. However, when he was about to refuse, Uyama saw Akutsu looking at him. Of course, that made Uyama unable to refuse. The young man felt so bad because he caught Akutsu's attention even at school. When at home, as usual, Akutsu had taken a comfortable position while reading on Uyama's bed. Uyama wanted to tell Akutsu to leave him alone at school, but Uyama didn't dare. Akutsu seemed to be in a bad mood since earlier. Suddenly, Akutsu called Uyama. The girl wanted to talk about what happened that day. Uyama was already confused. He thought negatively that Akutsu was angry with him because Uyama had tried to refuse to help Akutsu's friends at school. Unexpectedly, Akutsu actually asked why Uyama didn't refuse Akutsu's friends at school. Uyama was then very surprised and confused to hear Akutsu's question just now. Akutsu reiterated her question about why Uyama didn't refuse when asked for help by Akutsu's friends. In fact, Akutsu admitted that she had hinted to Uyama to refuse. Uyama apparently misunderstood. The sharp gaze Akutsu saw earlier at school was not because Akutsu ordered Uyama to comply with Akutsu's friends' requests, but actually the opposite. Another thing Akutsu asked was why Uyama was so friendly to Akutsu's friends even after helping them. Uyama evaded it. A confused Uyama then wanted to know the reason behind Akutsu's behavior. Akutsu always makes him fetch things for her. So what is she so upset about? Akutsu simply answered nothing. Akutsu said with a blushing face that seeing Uyama do things for someone else upsets her for some reason. Akutsu told Uyama that next time he should just say no outright, because it would be a hassle if his friends marked him. Uyama just had to listen to what Akutsu had to say. Uyama then answered obediently without question or refusal. Uyama didn't quite understand what Akutsu meant, but from her attitude, he felt his heart pounding.